This is the Unearthing Art Podcast with Michele and Bec, where we dig into the messy reality of making art that matters, raw and real conversations about being an artist, navigating the creative process, and expressing our honest and sometimes weird selves.
Happy New Year, Michele. It's
Happy
2023.
Happy New Year. I know. I can't believe it's already the new year.
It has been an interesting few weeks. We haven't recorded for, I think, 5 weeks, but we have been chatting and we have been messaging. So I know a little bit about how your Christmas and New Year went, and you know a little bit about how mine went. And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about that because I think we're both taking some lessons from the time into our 2023, would you say?
Yeah, and I think I'd love to hear your lessons so that I can definitely use those next year because I have different kinds of lessons.
Tell us what happened. What's happening for you in the last month?
It's been much busier than I expected, I think is one thing. You know, there's always like, yeah, I'm going to be busy. I'm going to get into the studio. I'm going to do all these extra things. And then there's Christmas. What reality looks like is a little bit of chaos and a little more chaos and more chaos and more chaos. So my life's been a little more chaotic than I had imagined. And honestly, probably a few meltdowns along the way, truthfully. And not as much studio time as much as I really had hoped for. Christmas is a little rougher than I remember. It's funny. I think I've got these memories of, you know, things kind of smooth out. But Christmas was always a difficult time because my dad got sick on actual Boxing Day. So every Christmas I go through this a little emotional trauma of remembering that experience. And 3 weeks later, he passed away. So that period is very difficult. And then, you know, then there's the let's eat too much food and have a sugar crash and all of that piled on top.
Yeah.
So it gets a little rough around the edges.
On that topic of being surprised by like our emotions and our reactions and times of the year, it's surprising to me, but not surprising how often that happens.
Yeah.
You know, like things happen on a seasonal basis, on a yearly basis, and it can take a number of years for some reason before we start to notice it. I have a similar thing that happens or has happened a lot in kind of January, February. And I don't know how much it's to do with emotional stuff about starting the new year. It may be, but I think it actually has a lot to do with physical stuff. Like it's summer in Australia, it's very hot. I get very drained when it's humid. We've already talked before about how we're very different bunnies. You'd rather be hot and I'd rather be cold. So I just get much more tired, and I think that has an impact. And again, this is fascinating because it's not necessarily directly the impact, the physical impact. It's kind of the interaction between that and my expectations.
Yeah.
So you have the beginning of the year. I'm wanting to feel upbeat. I'm wanting to think about, you know, getting ahead on stuff. And then I'm met with this kind of reality check of, oh, but there's only so much you can do. You need to rest. You feel a bit blur. And then it starts
all those expectations.
Competing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it is, isn't it? It is a reality versus expectations. And I do think it's really interesting because same thing with my dad and all of that. Like it's been years that's happened, and yet I'm surprised and knocked over by it as if it's a new experience, you know? And I'm like, oh, this is a thing. This is actually a thing that keeps happening. So I think that being gentle with myself has been something that has been absolutely essential. I think that because, you know, expectations get a little bit different from reality, there is that sense that we can get hard on ourselves. I don't know if you feel that same way, but I know it's like, why am I not doing this quicker? Why is this not working? Or why am I feeling so sad still after all these years, you know?
Exactly. I think that's really what, you know, we kind of forget somehow our human bits. It's emotional, it's internal, it's in our body, and then we have these expectations. We have this kind of idealized idea of the way something's going to go that forgets all that stuff about being human, that forgets all that stuff about getting tired, things coming up, things going wrong, and that's where the tension happens. I think it's useful to remember that going into a new year where we might be making plans as well, because we might have idealized versions of how the year's going to go as well, that don't necessarily take into account all that human stuff that happens with us through the year. And
totally, like
remembering maybe there might be certain times of the year that are more difficult than others, that are more challenging, where for a multitude of reasons, emotionally, physically, commitments with other people in our life, just things that happen. And then we start the year with these rose-colored glasses and we think, I can time block and schedule every week of 2023. It's going to be beautiful. And then
and then reality
things happen. Sometimes the same things happen that happened last year, but we've forgotten to take it into account.
It's funny. I think the brain does a really good job of blocking out those things too, because my kids are home for school holidays as well. And so things that seem really simple, where I can say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do this one task, is not actually something I can count on, because there might be disruptions from them and chaos, that I hadn't actually planned for, and I think I like the way that you say the human bits, because it really is the human experience kind of presenting itself in a way that, I guess I'm a little bit like, hey, I don't have time for this part. I don't have
time to be human.
I don't have time to be human. I need to get this done, or I want to get this done, or I want to do this, And we don't really have full control, and that's quite frustrating, I think.
Yes. And all of that came into play, no doubt, in this big project that you were doing, which was migrating the Origin Art membership from one platform to another. Just saying that, sounds simple, but of course it's not just one platform. It's all integrated, and there's multiple technology platforms that talk to each other to make it all happen.
I've been moving Origin Art to a new platform because I want to have some really amazing things happen this coming year and obviously going forward. And that has taken a huge amount of work that I thought would be a lot simpler than, of course, I imagined in my head. I guess the good news is I really have an appreciation for all the content that I've worked on, and with the members, and what's happened over the last few years, and the amount of things. It just really gets me excited when I look at the upside of it, as opposed to how much work it is. I'm like, wow, this is really amazing and good and super helpful, and also something that's reminding me all of what I've worked on, and kind of like, oh yeah, that's right, there's all this, so I guess that's I do have a good appreciation in some ways. I just have been a little bit more buried in tech than I usually am, and
and not in paint.
So I'm a little so I think it's just been a little more tech oriented than paint oriented. So I'm really itching to get back into the studio, which I am actually going to do today after we get off this podcast.
Wonderful. I think that that's really nice, though, that doing the project, I know it took a lot out of you, and it was like very intensive, and you got into that real sort of, grit your teeth and just get through the grind of the project over the last, maybe thinking it was going to be 1 week and then 2 weeks and then 3 weeks. It's nice, though, that it incorporated that review aspect and feeling like at least there was a little bit of payout of feeling like you were able to recognize the work you'd done. Yes. And I think also that having spoken to you about this a little bit and got the messages like, Bec, why isn't this working? What's happening? Oh, it's driving me crazy. Yeah. Having spoken to you a little bit about that process, also, I think, although it's been challenging, it's also given you a little bit of lessons or kind of good information for how you want to spend your year as well, which I think we can always take these time periods and say, okay, what worked, what didn't, how would I apply that going forward? Like, I know you want to keep you've got a renewed commitment to keep kind of the technical and infrastructure side as simple as possible, for example, so that you can concentrate more on doing the stuff you really love, which is creating the content and working with people. Is that something
that
you've taken away?
Yeah, that, as well as I think it also, which is what this podcast is all about, it really required me to step up and do things, I guess, not as a newbie platform, more as a experienced person. I want to have much more control over this because I really want to do some really fun, amazing things with it that will have a better member experience, and the flip side of it, to help automate it more for me so that I can have some things more streamlined. So in order to do that, it makes me have to step into some bigger shoes, I think, and step up a little bit more. And like, it's kind of the baby version versus the grown-up version. Like, Origin Art membership has grown up. Like, it's coming into its fully capable version of itself. And as a leader, that requires me to step into what that looks like from a tech perspective, and be confident in that way, and learn things that I don't know, troubleshoot things that I don't know, and I think that's the ongoing thing of being an entrepreneur in general. Like, there's always going to be problems. It's usually problem solutions, and then more problems and more solutions. And one thing I have learned from this was, even though I was really exhausted and it was really long hours, I didn't have meltdowns, like as in it was going to break me. I could have a little reflection and say, okay, I've had some growth in that, where, I didn't let tech kill me or get me, beat the best of me. Because sometimes tech, are really random things, that you just feel like, oh, I'm just not capable of doing this. But I do feel that, it did have moments of frustration that I suspect won't end. But I think that's just part of being an entrepreneur, that you just troubleshoot it and hold steady.
What I love about that is that I think everything that you just said, you could replace the word entrepreneur or your project that you're working on with artist and art.
Yes.
Because we can go through those same rocky kind of waters. I know that you can have that feeling of, I just can't work this out. I'm just not breaking through. I borderline want to toss this in.
Yes.
I did very late in the process, just within the last couple of days. I know that something that had been working and you thought you were right at the end suddenly broke.
Yes.
And we exchanged some messages, and you were like, Bec, I was right at the edge there. It was just like, the straw that broke the camel's back. It was a small thing, but when it comes at the end of that kind of big effort, and you're tired, and you're just like, what? Why is this happening to me?
It's one of those things, like, it can't, if you're just like, well, no, it's going to work. It can't break you. You think it can, and that's what I think when I'm tired, one of the things I know is, like, take a deep breath, get some sleep, and look at the problem again with fresh eyes. Because something, when I'm tired, can feel like it's going to break me. But if I'm freshly rested and I can kind of think from a new perspective, because that's really what any troubleshooting is, or problem solving, how do we solve this in a different way? And when it came to this, it was like the same thing as artists, like, reach out for help. Don't try to do it on your own. And I think sometimes we think that we should do everything on our own. And even though this platform is me doing it on my own, I still can reach out for help. I can still reach out for support. I don't have to do it all on my own. And actually, I don't think any of us are capable of doing everything all on our own without, learning or having resources or people who know a little bit more, in certain areas.
For sure.
So,
for sure. I have learnt over many years that when I find many years, that when I reach that feeling really strung out and really like I've doubled down on a problem, like I'm just trying to apply pure willpower or kind of force to something, I got to stop myself, say, hang on, this is not gonna nothing's gonna change unless I change something, and I'm gonna walk away and give it some air. And the same as, you know, when I was talking before about noticing my own energy ebb and flow, and noticing that when I am feeling really tired and starting to wind up that anxiety cycle of, oh no, I feel tired, I can't cope with whatever I'm trying to deal with here, you know, it's gonna, and you start to sort of spiral and think, this is not gonna work, how am I ever gonna deal with this? I really know that just when I have that feeling, when I'm in that place, I say, this is not the time for making plans, this is not the time for making decisions, this is the time to recharge.
Yes.
Like, I just tell myself that in a really matter-of-fact way. Like, there's no good decisions or no good planning. You can't think your way out of, I guess that's what I'm getting to. You can't think your way out of this kind of emotional, physical space. You need to recharge those elements before you can come back and make the change. Yeah,
it's interesting too, because like you said, it doesn't really matter what project it is, or if it's art or this technical project, getting in there and trying to force something to willpower and overworking it, you know, is something that we can do on a tech stack or in a piece of artwork where we're just literally trying to force it, you know, into existence, where, you know, if we just kind of step back and take a deep breath, it can be helpful. So it's funny. The human experience.
Is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
The human bits.
Those darn human bits, they always get in the way. So we've talked a ton about what I've been up to. What about your holiday break, which I have to say I'm a little bit envious of, sounding like it was an actual holiday.
Yes. So I went into Christmas and New Year time with an intention that I would have a couple of weeks where I could relax and also just focus on studio time, where I wouldn't have any other commitments, because I don't have a huge number of family commitments. We just only had one event, unlike, I know you have a big extended Italian family, and there would have been a lot more events for you, Michele, but it's a bit quieter for me. So I thought, I'll take this opportunity. But what really surprised me, which I told you about and I didn't expect, is something happened towards the end of December where I had this feeling of like, it was like being back in school holidays, summer school holidays. So in Australia, for those who are listening outside of Australia, summer and Christmas is our big holiday period. It's the break in the school year. So schools take 6 weeks of holidays over summer and don't go back till early February. So this is the time where, you know, at the end of December when you're in school, you have the big breakup, you have the parties, you have like a week of school where you don't do much, and then it's just like this unending summer of freedom where hopefully when you're younger, where you run around and barefoot and jump in pools and all that kind of good stuff. And what I really noticed, probably very similar to what we're talking about before, about suddenly noticing in the midst of it something that these kind of human bits that we hadn't noticed before, was that I had this sensation of having that really open-ended summer holiday time. And it's not something that I've had in many years. And I really thought about what led to that. And I think perhaps it's because in the past, when I've had a lot of client work or working on my own projects, it just runs through. There's no real break in the time. You know, you go from December into January and you're just working. There's no differentiation. And I think perhaps it had something to do with the podcast, because last year, for the first time, I really had a very scheduled thing that was happening every week, and the work associated with editing that happened every week. And then when we took a break from recording the podcast, suddenly... I don't know. I was like a kid with no responsibilities. I wasn't thinking about what was going to be posted the next Monday and getting things edited and getting things posted. The thing that I loved about that is my favorite way to feel about the studio, is feeling like there's no other commitments in the day, in the week, nothing else I have to worry about, nobody else I have to worry about, just really open-ended, and I can take my time. And it's such a paradox, I guess, that the more I feel like I don't have to worry about time, the more I make of my time. You know, the more I can just go into the studio and then suddenly things happen very quickly. Whereas when I feel very scheduled and kind of blocked in, and I know that I only have 1 hour or 2 hours, for some reason I'm much more likely to be anxious about it, I guess, and feel tight around it. So what I took out of all of that is I had some great studio time.
Nice.
In summary, which, you know, just some great experimental play stuff and really kind of quick iterations of moving my ideas around my art along, that I feel like I have really clear vision for what I want to create in the coming I'm not going to say 2023 because that's a whole year. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a very clear vision about what I want to create in the next few months, which will grow from there. The other thing I'm thinking about is, how do I have that feeling more often,
Yeah,
Michele?
it is interesting, isn't it? Because it's like your brain just said, you can do anything you want, Bec. And you were like, and then your creativity was like, let's play. And I think that's a good lesson. Like I think that's where it goes into the human experience again, where I always say, like, I have to trick myself. If you can find a way to trick yourself where you can say, okay, these are the days I've got things scheduled, but this is wide open. And I think there's, it's one little word called pressure. Like when you say, oh, I've only got this 1 hour, your brain, or I don't know how we're all wired, but it's literally going, okay, you better produce something. You only have 1 hour. You got to make that count, right? And so that pressure to me is the one thing that squeezes the creativity out. So I don't give myself any boundaries. In fact, you want to hear my next trick in the next few weeks? Because I'm in the middle of working on an exhibition.
Yeah.
So it is a creative time, but it's also a very productive time. And so I'm like, I could work in the morning, I could work in the evening, I could work, I'm kind of just giving myself like this flexibility, as opposed to saying you only have like 3 hours, and if you don't get this done, and the reality is, again, reality and expectations. I just realized my son is already back at soccer again this week. And so I'm doing my Uber driving again 3 times a week. So I was like, oh, maybe you're not painting in the evenings like you thought you would, 3 times a week. But I'm like, well, that still leaves 4, open. So I keep having to look for, well, when are the opportunities, as opposed to looking at when I don't,
I really like that, because it is about putting your attention where it helps, because noticing commitments starting to come back in and just focusing on those. Like even last week, coming out of that kind of idyllic period, things started, the world started. The lovely thing for me about kind of traditional holiday times is that other people in the world are having time off and having holidays, and somehow it feels like the global pressure comes off a bit, if you know what I mean. Like everyone else isn't working, so I can kind of just spend the time being fun and relaxed. But as the world starts moving a bit more again, and people are working, friends are working, family, commitments, people expect you to be available at certain times, stuff comes up, I could feel myself start to tighten up and to feel overwhelmed by those kind of intrusions. It feels kind of like an intrusion on a, I'm one of those people, I'm not sure we've talked about this, but I'm one of those people, I feel like I could go and live in a shack in a mountain somewhere just quietly by myself with no interruptions, and I'd be really happy. So I'm a little bit kind of sensitized to this idea of having like a ideal, a quiet, protected
space. I could
Yeah.
just have a little studio next to the beach, and I would be as happy as can be. But it's so far from reality right now that I just have to, pretend. So one of the things that I've been doing, which because it is summer and in Melbourne, sometimes it doesn't look like summer, even though it is summer. But when the sun comes out, I have a chair and I just go sit in it for a few minutes every morning, whether it's a cup of coffee or whatever, which is something that I'm really trying to make as a morning routine, just to kind of ground me into nature a little bit more instead of automatically jump, from get in the shower, get on the computer, go outside, like just kind of break the routine a little bit and make it feel a little more summery.
I love that. I love that because I know that works because I do that kind of thing too. And I think it's fascinating that taking a bit of time to sit or be kind of without a purpose, to be unpressured, it's kind of like a signal to your brain. See, I have time. We can sit outside and have a cup of tea, and it might only be 10 or 15 minutes, but it's more like the experience of that. You start to open up and feel like a bit more limitless, a bit more possibilities than if you'd gone, no, I don't have time to spend that 15 minutes. I need to get on the computer and do this. And that just makes you feel more scheduled and crowded.
And
so
I think,
I love that.
I mean, I definitely don't know a lot about all this, quantum physics, time, space, all that stuff. But I do believe, because I really look, the more I do, the more I can do. But that's because I'm always looking for the opportunities as opposed to the limitations. So that's as much, like, I don't know the scientific part of it, but I do really look and see time like it's expansive when I'm looking for it specifically. So that's why I thought, well, in the morning, there's no reason I can't have a cup of coffee and sit outside and do nothing for 10 minutes. Maybe it turns into 20 or a half an hour, or whatever, but just to almost kind of create like a relax routine as opposed to a work routine.
It really makes the rest of the day, I find, feel more expansive. It's the mindset, it's the acting as if you can start the morning in a way that kind of, this might sound weird, but if you can start the morning in a way that you believe that time is expansive and that you have the time to have a really good day, then somehow the day believes you. I don't know.
It is interesting, isn't it?
The day can flow that way. I mean, I think you believe yourself.
It feels so much more open and relaxed, as a presence. And so I feel like it just really sets the day in the right direction, a little more relaxed as opposed to pressured.
Exactly.
I think when I can be more relaxed from the beginning, it's just, everything works a lot better. So it's interesting though. I mean, I'm sure the scientists can explain what's happening, but I definitely, during this whole process where I was working really long days, all these extra pressures, like, oh, I got to get in the studio because of the exhibition and, all of that. And then I'm thinking, okay, but if you sit there and get all stressed out about it, it's not going to give you any helpful clues on how to move forward. So, that's where I was really going, what could I do to trick myself? Like, how do I come up with the, relax formula for the summer? Because the reality is my kids are still home. We still are on summer holidays over here. My husband's going to have some more time off. And so there will be family holiday things happening around me wanting to get stuff done. So I still have to navigate through the next, I don't know, was it 3-4 weeks before it kind of is back to our normal routine. And I want to enjoy it. I think that's the other part, is I really, want to enjoy the moments, where the sun's out. I mean, especially because I'm a huge fan of, I just love the energy the sun gives. Get out there. Touch the ground, with my bare feet, get in the sand. We did go to the beach over Christmas for a day, and it was amazing. I just, the beach is my second happy place, where I think, we all have our places that just, we feel like, I don't know, it's like the dreams can pop out, like it just feels like everything is possible when you're in this relaxed state. So I'm just like, how do I, if I'm not at the beach, how do I bring the mindset of what I feel like at the beach to home? so that I can make that more
Yeah.
fun and relaxed. So yeah, so I'm going to take a few lessons from you over the next 3 weeks to incorporate more of a relaxed lifestyle.
I'm going to be trying to take my own lessons and really, how can I have that playful, relaxed mindset? Because that is definitely the way I want to be. And I think, because, it is the new year. Everyone's talking about how to set up the new year. For me, I think it's much more important to focus on what are the conditions that kind of support me to be feeling creative, to be relaxed, to have those good studio times, than it is to be having a blocked out week plan of hours in the studio and that kind of thing.
I'm less interested in time blocking every single week and day to the max, and more interested in creating like a relaxed, creative, curious mindset for just how the day goes. But staying true to, I still have goals and still have things I want to accomplish, but I'm really going to factor in the reality, of it could look like this, but it might not, and be flexible, I guess, with that, and see how we go. Because I think for me as an American in Australia, this part is always a little tricky to navigate, January, because typically Americans don't take January off. We have more of like July, August. So for the Americans who aren't familiar with the Australian time, we're kind of in our late July, August time period. And the kids do go back to school in the heat of February, but it becomes a little bit more back to school in February. So that's when I suppose more routine will happen. I'd like to say less disruptions, but I'd say it's probably more disruptions. But it's, it's called life.
Life doesn't
life
stop happening.
As a human and having people in your life. So yeah, but I don't know. I still feel, as usual, very optimistic and happy about the new year. Super excited about doing a whole new year of our podcast. I think we're going to go onto a deeper level that we're going to discover together, and we'll go from there.